You ready?
Yeah.
I'm going to start trying. Organic or paid social?
Organic.
Video or carousels?
Both, but carousel.
TikTok or Reels?
Reels.
What's your coffee order?
Oat latte.
Favorite quote?
Adapt or die.
Paris or New York?
Paris.
Friends or Seinfeld?
Seinfeld.
What's your favorite podcast?
Probably It's a Lot by Abby Chatfield.
And what was the first concert you went to?
First concert. Oh, God. Short stack. At the Princess Theatre.
Cool. Thanks, Ella. Ella, welcome to the Beyond Billables podcast. You were a guest of ours at an event a few years ago, and we had a great time. We were part of the founders team, and I loved your insight into content and business, especially back then, mate. So thank you for joining. I wanted to really dive into that, really talk business, social media, content today. But tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your story?
In terms of me getting into my life.
Well, we can start there. No, tell us about Social Cut.
Well, Social Cut is an organic social media agency. We do content. We do a bit of everything. We don't really niche necessarily in terms of, I guess, the specific area of business, but we do kind of focus on more service-based businesses and businesses that need to generate sort of like brand awareness, because I think we probably fall more in the PR side of social rather than like the paid side. Was definitely not something we dip our toes into too much. So yes, that's kind of the top level what we do.
So PR side. So what does that look like from what you do for clients?
Yeah, so it's really, for us, it's a big part of like creating the brand awareness. So it's about getting the right content, getting the right messaging, making sure there's consistency, and making sure that the client really stays ahead. So when someone is wanting to, like, I don't know, buy a service, come to the restaurant, do whatever, they get the feel of what it's like internally before they're even there. So basically we want to create a storefront as much as we can, where they get the feeling or the insight or whatever. So it becomes a coveted sort of experience. I suppose the other side of that as well is we do some of like that influencer, the pop-ups, the events, the collaborations, because again, a lot of what we do is experiential, even if it's a digital experience or a in real life experience, IRL. That's kind of where we fall. So the paid is important, but it's definitely for us, not our bread and butter. Our bread and butter is supporting that to create an actual touch point for a customer.
What does that look like for a new business coming to you saying, Ella, I know, this social media stuff, we're not getting enough traction, or we want to achieve X, Y, and Z. What is that process?
It would depend on the industry and the business, because it's how big is a piece of string to some degree, and how big's your budget. But I guess some of the core stuff we look at is, what's your messaging? What's your fall down as well? What's your big weakness at the moment, or what are you not getting enough of, or what do you think you need more of? And then go from there. So that might be a matter of creating more content or creating more engaging content that actually showcases personality or vibe or something like that. Or it could be really more about looking at, are you using the right channels, or are you targeting the right audiences? Because we do have an element of paid in all of our organic packages, which is the brand awareness.
Yeah.
So it may be that the content's already up to scratch to some degree, but they're just not hitting the right market, or they're not doing the external engagement, because that's a big part of it as well, is like actually manually engaging with other brands or other accounts. Or maybe they need to engage an influencer or a UGC creator or something like that to actually get their feet in the right audiences so they start popping up in the right places. So it would depend. Hopefully that answers that question a little bit. But
what do most businesses get wrong, do you see?
I think it's sporadic. I think that they have been told they have to post every single day. I don't believe that. I think that's ridiculous. I think obviously some industries, if you have enough content, sure, whatever. And like if you're e-com, maybe. But for most businesses, it's about creating content that works and posting in a healthy amount. So something that you can keep up with, maintain, keep constant, and being active. Because I think that's a big part, is they're like, okay, cool. And they have a huge burst of stuff because they're feeling stoked. And then they've got other things on their plate. And then all of a sudden they don't post for another 6 months. And I mean, that's a big do as I say, not as I do, because I am that person. If you look at our account, that's exactly how we operate.
Yeah.
But that's literally just because that's a me thing.
Yeah.
but and even that, I absolutely see the difference. Is like when there is a consistent posting strategy for Social Cut, we get leads, we get requests, we get exactly what we need. When there isn't, like if we, there'll be literally months where I just forget to post, or it just gets pushed to the bottom priority list because obviously client work is more important for us. Then nothing happens and it stagnates. And then it's a slow climb to get that engagement back, because even people that were previously engaging with you, the algorithm shifted, they're not seeing your content anymore. So I think that's the big thing, is that consistency, and not just posting for the sake of posting, like making sure there is proper messaging and making sure that your posting frequency actually supports the level of content you're willing or able to produce, if that makes sense.
What platforms are the best to be on at the moment? Do you have to be on every platform?
Absolutely not. Yeah. I really, really think that's an overwhelming statement for a lot of people. And I think people believe that they have to be on absolutely everything all the time. If you're a big company, sure. Like, you probably have the resources to do that. You have the time to do that. You might have a dedicated social media person in-house, or team, actually. If you're producing that much content, you probably would need, content creator, et cetera, et cetera. It would depend on your industry, would be the biggest answer to that. So, like, if you're professional services, obviously LinkedIn's probably quite an important platform for you. Instagram, I would always say, is a good platform. Facebook depends on your market. Like, if you are trying to reach an older audience, or you've got a group, or you need to engage with a community, it's quite a good platform for that. TikTok obviously is great too, but that requires a high level of video content constantly. So there's a lot of energy and time involved in that. I think people do forget that that's a constant beast you have to feed. So
is that a budget problem for clients?
It
mostly?
is. Yeah. It can be. The other thing for us as well, when we are looking at clients and taking them across to TikTok, is making sure they've got enough of a bit of a bank before we kick it off, in case there's not enough more content, if that makes sense. Like, we want to have a healthy amount that we can go, okay, we can guarantee there'll be a posting schedule of X amount of months or X amount of weeks. And then we know that they're going to have the opportunity to refill it and pre-fill it, because sometimes it'll be the client might want to produce the content themselves just from a budget perspective, which means they need to do it.
Yeah.
Because there's no point in us getting up there posting, 6 weeks worth of content and then it runs dry.
Yeah.
So that is a channel that, is quite hungry to feed, and I think it's very, very useful, but you need to have a bit of an idea of how you're going to get that completed.
Yeah, I see with professional firms especially, the struggle with TikTok is volume, and also their engagement on platform, which you mentioned before, which is really important as well.
Being active on the platform.
Well, yeah, and people who do it well are really great at that. Like, they, especially on TikTok, they really milk the question and answer style very, very well.
Yeah.
And that drives even more engagement. But that's difficult with quite structured businesses who might not have a face for the business, but is a brand. Like, how do you...
I don't think you need a face for the business. Yeah. When you are like an agency or, a firm, you really can rely on your product experts and have individual people, and it actually helps diversify the content. It keeps it nice and fresh. You can have like a spokesperson if you want to have someone who's like your point of go-to for that sort of interview Q&A stuff, and that doesn't even have to be one of your experts. That could be someone's like, let's say we're talking about firms, that could be maybe one of your secretaries who might have a bit more flexibility in their diary, going around and doing that questions in the office. I think obviously the thing is though, is that in that respect, the whole team needs to be committed. I think that's the biggest drawback for a lot of those sorts of agencies, businesses, real estate agencies, where the team isn't behind it and you've got one or two people that are, and that's where your content runs out, because you can't just keep producing with those two people. Yeah. Because if it becomes boring, it becomes dry, there's not enough diversity in content. Yeah. And it's a huge time suck for them, because most of the time, if you are doing it internally, they're experts because they've got other jobs to do.
Yeah, so. Sure. They're actually doing the work of the business.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a big thing. It's like, if you're going to go down that path, and if you are, a service-based business, it is obviously you're not showcasing product. So you do need to have that human interaction. Yeah. And so you really need to make sure that you're bringing the team along on the journey, because I know that is a challenge we have with some clients as well, is that like only 2 people will turn up for a shoot and we're like, we need more.
Well, it's hard. Like, I understand as well. It depends. Like, people either aren't confident in making it and they don't see it as their job, or they don't. And somewhat businesses need to be forward thinking in that when they're hiring people now, especially, and say, actually part of the job is you engage, because that's part of selling the business. That's part of your job. Yeah. I talk to professional firms about this all the time. The false divide between doing the work, bringing the work in, and all of this. And like, bringing the work in isn't extra work. No. The culture of the business has to also change and reward, like, understand the time it takes, the effort it takes. It's just part of your job is to do X.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when you think about it, like previously, let's say we're talking like 5, 10 years ago, part of your job was to go to networking events. Part of your job was to do lead gen that way, was to go to those meetings, to go have coffees, to go out there and spruik or, do mail. This is exactly the same. It's just a different format. And I think the mindset needs to shift. Is like, yes, your face might be on the internet, but your face was at the networking event talking to those people anyway.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a huge amount of difference. And I think that's where that conversation needs to shift internally. Because lead gen is an obvious part of a lot of people's job. But the platform, it needs to be on there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's talk Instagram.
Yeah.
Obviously there's been it's changed like a lot of platforms over time. There were always an announcement every few weeks about algorithm changes. There's one recently last week about how all the different aspects have their own algorithms, which is really interesting. It made me feel better actually, because a lot of the struggle is doing it all, especially on Instagram, like reels and stories and the feed and engagement and everything like that. How do you break that down for clients? And is there a hierarchy of what's more important than other things?
Not really. I think it comes down to your audience. It comes down to your execution. I think that's really the main thing. So like you said, the algorithm does change constantly. For a long time, I always giggle about it because basically Meta, we all know this, comes to drown out another platform. If a new platform comes, they want to destroy them. And that's just the way it is. So that's something to, I guess, to keep an eye on for forward thinking is like if there is a platform that's doing well, for example, TikTok, then obviously it's going to favor Reels. And that's where you're going to get all of your content reach. Years ago when Snapchat was really massive, then that was when stories became really big and they got a lot of reach. At the moment, though, I think they've understood they need to go back to their roots where photography is a valid platform, piece of content. So is videography, so reels, and so is the stories because people do watch that. So I think the way to manage that is work out where your strengths lie as a business. I do believe that you do need reels. I can't say that there's any businesses that don't need that content, but it doesn't need to be every post.
Yeah.
If you don't have the capacity, for example, if your team isn't shooting that much content or they're not comfortable, just try to aim for 1 or 2 a month and get them sort of put in peak times where people are looking or mixed within your content, and then make sure there's a consistency on carousels and maybe they're infographics or maybe they're actual photos of your team or whatever, and then the stories need to be sort of sprinkled between those. Now obviously the best way to do that is using a scheduling tool. If anyone doesn't have one,
What do you use?
We use Loomly, which I think you told me about many years ago.
Yeah. I like it for the collaboration
exactly.
element. I know there are other really good tools for other things, but that
the client approval system, unreal. I haven't been able to find anything better.
Oh, that's good to know, actually.
Because I remember many years ago you and I were talking and I almost considered building my own because I hated all of them so much. But then the APIs, the constant read, no, absolutely not. So this was the best one I could find so far.
That's really interesting. So mention client coming in. A lot of the time people are just, I need more leads, Ella.
Yeah.
What sort of, if I come to you and say, Ella, I just need more leads, what do we do?
I tell you to go work with an ad specialist.
Yeah. Well, how do you get work? Again, the flip side of that, how do you get work into your business?
Organic does produce leads, but it's not an instant fix. You have to work at it and then it will become a natural thing and you'll get the brand reputation. People just naturally come to you. Whereas if you need more leads instantly, you will need to go paid. But it's not going to, once the money's run out of your ad campaign, the tap's turned off, you're not seeing it anymore. So that's where the strategy has to be in tandem.
Yeah.
For us, we get our leads through social media organically because we have spent years and years building a really strong brand presence. As I said, I'm very aware that when we don't post, we don't get them from Instagram anymore or from TikTok. But when we do get that sort of ramp back up. But we do see a 6 to 8 week period for that to happen because we need to have a consistency, etc.
Yeah.
We also get a lot through SEO. Again, because a lot of our traffic came from Instagram very early on, it's pushed our SEO right up. So it's a double whammy. You obviously get your leads, but that also helps your rankings.
Yeah.
And then obviously word of mouth and referrals are a big part of ours as well. So we actually don't have ads. We haven't had an ad strategy, I think, ever. Maybe once or twice when we've had workshops that we've run. But from a brand perspective, we've never really gone down that path and we still have consistent leads come through. But I suppose that's because we do organic social.
Yeah, well, no, that's right. And I've said this before. I think it just takes more time.
It does.
But you also need a bigger top of funnel
Yeah.
And you need to be reaching the right people and
Yeah.
building those relationships over time and having that consistency.
Absolutely.
But the classic example is when you compare, and I've seen agencies do this where like, ads equal X, Y, and Z, this many leads, but over time, like your organic will equal this many leads.
Yeah.
It's just the different time scales, and
They are.
the discussion around leads is interesting because I think a lot of people get confused about, their return on investment.
Yeah, 100%.
Because they're comparing organic social, or they're comparing their brand and brand awareness, top of funnel stuff, to a 3-month paid campaign.
Yeah.
And they're just different things.
They
yeah.
are. And I think that's a big part of it as well. And I think something that's quite interesting about that as well is I find when I know on those occasions that we have run campaigns, and I'd say there's probably only been like, a handful of times in the last nearly 8 years that we've done that. The leads we get aren't quality for us anyway. Like, yes, they are leads that will convert, but are they the ones that are the right brand fit for us?
Yeah.
Often they're not. Whereas the ones we get from organic, they've looked at us, they've watched us, they've built a virtual connection with us where they're emotionally invested and they're like, yes, this is the person I want to work with.
Yeah.
And those relationships are incredible. They last for years and years because they already understand what you're about. They've already sort of, whereas like if you're just throwing an ad in someone's face and I've never seen you before, then it is a little different.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in saying that, that's obviously for service. Like for other sort of industries, very different. Like if you're talking fashion, if you're talking venue, like
sure,
ads do work.
Yeah.
So
and no, absolutely. Well, different buying intent,
Yeah.
right? And so the nature of the relationship is different as well. We've exactly the same. Like I like to experiment with ads. Like I still think you want multiple avenues of potential people coming to you. And there are ways to filter and improve that quality of lead, but nothing beats either a referral
Yeah.
from a friend or existing client or someone who's seen your work, or someone who's even better. Like some of the best clients I've ever had have followed us for like years.
exactly.
And
now they're ready to invest.
they're ready.
Exactly.
And it can take years. Like with what we do, if you want a brand refresh or a new website or strategy, like it's not a hair on fire thing until it is.
Yeah.
Right. and the ones that, get to that point, it's fine. But it can take time.
Yeah.
And that's not going to work with an ad campaign per se.
Yeah.
Either.
Because
So
we're not ready at that point. And I think that's a big part for a lot of our clients being in that service space. A lot of them, it's the same sort of thing. Like if you want to buy a house, you may not be ready to buy a house for another 6 to 12 months. But by that stage, you've found the right buyer agency or the right real estate or whoever it is. Or, and that's kind of, I guess, why when I said we niche in our area, we niche in that service, like high purchase, because it is really about that relationship brand building. Because by the time they want it, they know it's you.
Yeah.
They don't even have to go looking.
Yeah.
Because they've followed you for long enough. They've understood your brand. And it's like, or if they have someone in the industry or a friend, they might go, hey, who do you guys use? Oh, I haven't used them, but I've been following these guys for ages. They seem to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Instant referral.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the engagement point. How do you encourage clients or get them engaging? Because a lot of the time, a lot of businesses see socials as a dumping ground for content.
Yeah.
Or, it's a one-way street. Someone puts it out for me, I get a lead back. Isn't it a beautiful, magical thing?
Yeah.
Like, how do you get them to start engaging?
We do it.
You do it, yeah.
Some clients are really good, like especially if it's a personal brand, they're usually great and they want to do it. They have a need to do it. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
We've not really found a wonderful solution for that.
Well, I even know from my business, like, it's not always me engaging.
Yeah.
The team engages as well.
Yeah.
Because, some platforms I don't want to spend my time on, and I've only got so much time to engage on different platforms. So if we need to create a process around engagement, because you do need to engage.
Yeah. So that's part of, I guess, for us, our packages is we have an engagement metric where we have X amount of hours every month committed to that client's engagement. We do encourage that they engage on top of it. Whether they do or don't, at least we know there's a base level there.
Yeah. So why did you start an agency instead of like a lot of our friends and people that we know go out and do the course thing and personal brand thing? Why an agency?
It was an accident.
Right.
Like straight up an accident. And a happy accident. But basically, I was in-house for a bank for a long time and then moved into agency. And this was like years and years ago. Like this was like 8 years ago where social media was like, you just make memes for a living. Like
Yeah.
people didn't get it. And I was like, no.
Wouldn't that be great though?
Oh, how good. I'm like, yes, let's get back to that. I just make memes all day. And even the agency I worked for, like I was in the social media team. I was the social media team, and they're quite a big agency. And they're like, "Oh, what do you want to do after social?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Like, that's my job." And they're like, "Oh, it's not really a career, is it?" I'm like, it is. But at the time, I had a lot going on in my personal life, so kind of just like left everything, dropped everything. I was like, I'm out. Went to the Gold Coast, lived on the beach. Decided I'd be a barista, and that was it. I was like, I'm detoxing life. Maybe I hate social media. Because everywhere I went, it was just like roadblock. No one seemed to have like they just did it because they had to, not because there was a strategy or a forward planning. And at the time, I probably didn't even know if there was either. I was like, maybe it's not a career, but I'm like, surely it is. There's so much resource. Anyway, end up on the coast. A couple of weeks later, actually a couple of days later, got a phone call from someone, another agency saying, hey, we're desperate. We heard you were freelancing. And my answer was, no, I'm not. Absolutely not. Never again. And they're like, name your price. And I was like, okay. All right, sure, I'll just do this one project. And basically that's where it started. And I mean, both my parents are small business owners. So when Social Card originally started, it was more about training that small business owner group to know how to do social, or at least ask the right questions. But at that stage, the market didn't want that either. So there was like small business owners still didn't really care. They're like, oh, someone can do it for me. I could get my daughter to do it. I get my kid to do it. Yeah. So at that point, that's kind of how the agency started, because we were doing this sort of training and they're like, oh, great, you've trained me now. Can you do it? And I was like, I really don't want to, but okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, basically the agency sort of formed around that. And like, it was, as I sort of said, it was a happy accident. At that point, I was like, okay, there's really a market here for it. I think the big thing for me as well was I didn't want to head back to an agency that was like I don't want to say toxic, but like that real agency culture. That's not how I operate. I believe that happy creatives are good creatives.
Yeah.
And I didn't think there was a space like that for me in the advertising space. So yeah, that's kind of how we came about.
Yeah, right. So what's a normal day for Ella?
Oh God. I wouldn't really say there's a normal day, but I guess a typical sort of week for me is I mainly manage the team. So I'm like, yeah, I'm the admin chick.
Yeah.
So for the team, we're having a bit of a chat where projects are at, making sure that things are stuck correctly and assigning things out. I also do a lot of strategy. So I'm like a strategist across social, like that's my bread and butter. So if there is a strategy project, I'd usually oversee it, maybe assign some stuff out for research to come back and then start compiling. I do have a couple of team client meetings where required, but a lot of that sort of sits with our account managers. So when it comes to a bigger project, if we are working with clients, I'll jump in and out of those to add advice. Team management, talking to the accountant, trying to dissect numbers, not really succeeding at it. My bookkeeper used to color code the reports for me because she knew I wouldn't look at it unless it was pretty. So,
yeah, nice.
So that's kind of where I'm at.
I just check Xero to make sure that the VAS is ready and
That's
ready
right.
to go.
Me too.
Where do I sign? Like,
Yeah.
basically.
And that was what I said to my finance team. I was like, guys, this is not my bread and butter. And so they worked out if they recorded a long video and made it pretty colors, I'd sit down and watch it.
Wow.
I was like, I love this.
I guess speaking of the financials, how do you work out your pricing?
Oh God, that is a never ending problem. I guess for us, we work out what our overheads are because they are constantly changing. Like obviously we had our office space in Brisbane. We no longer have that, but now we've got other sort of spaces around Brisbane and Sydney. So we have to work out what our base of that is. And then obviously the staff wage and then the time, and then we work backwards. So everything is kind of time-based. We know how long a project should take and how many hours it should be. And then we keep track of that. Like timesheets for us are like bread and butter. Like they have to happen all the time. And they get audited. That's, I guess, another part of my life is auditing. Is this timesheet over across that client? Because the client's unhappy. That's always a big flag for us. Is like if we found that 3 months in a row, a lot of time is being taken beyond what's in their billables, that usually means there's something wrong. So the team member's not producing the work, the client's unhappy, they're probably going to leave. So that's a big part of our analytics every week with our team about when we're doing our whips. Hey, I've noticed there's a spike in this particular area of that client. Why? Like, are they complaining? Are they unhappy? Have we not understood the project? Are they the right fit?
So you design project? Did do you design pricing like on a monthly basis or just purely for time?
We have retainer, and
Yeah.
then if we go over or if we have additional projects, we then add them in.
Yeah, sure.
So it's 50-50. So there's retainer base, and then from there, if there's like an additional campaign, additional content shoot, then we project based.
Yeah.
So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So who do you look to for inspiration? And who's inspired you?
There's an agency down here in Sydney called Hat-Trick House, and I'm obsessed with their creativity and the way that they operate. They do operate in a slightly different space to us, where they're more in the e-com, the brand, like, you know, your cosmetics, etc. I think they're really, really fun. But outside of that, there's not really been a lot. Like, there's a couple, like Jessica Walsh in America, New York, I think. Her design agency is incredible. Museum of Ice Cream, like those sorts of big agencies and how they operate a little differently. But there's not really been anyone made, and I know this sounds weird, but like major, it's more like pulling small snippets of things you find, if that makes sense. Like the threads of when you come across something, I'll be like, yes, that's inspiring, or that's inspiring, but there's nothing really major where I'm like, this is the journey I've followed because of XYZ person.
Do you judge like the agency against that? Because a lot of time, what about, because I find inspiration is interesting when I'm looking to do a rebrand or a refresh for us.
Yeah,
like
of
I'll
course. From a design perspective, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll look out and I'll look at other agencies, other professional services as well, and think, oh, what are people doing? What's really interesting? And then like, all right, why aren't we doing a bit of that? Or, you know, how can we do this better? So that's how I kind of get that inspiration from. And social media is great for that too.
Yeah.
Because in your feed, like I follow lots of like design agencies, and I'll be like, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
All right, team, we got to like step it up. This is what we want to achieve.
Yeah.
So I guess, what do you see for Social Cut? Like, what's the big, like the goal? What's the next few years look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I mean that because obviously in the last 8 years, we've had a recession, we've had COVID, we've had so many different things. And so basically it almost feels like we're in startup 2.0, really, because like we've had to refresh, reposition, pivot. So as much as I'm like, I'd like to see XYZ, whether that's where we are in 3 years is a big question mark.
Yeah.
I think the big part for us will be really finding our feet across our Sydney, Brisbane clients, and Gold Coast is our other kind of region that we work within, and having a strong team across those two. We previously would spread out across multiple areas, but I'm really wanting to make sure that we have team there to support that. So potentially looking at maybe, you know, let's say in a perfect world in 5 years' time, like a New Zealand office, keeping those sort of regional cities and having like 2 or 3 sort of team members serving a client base there and working directly with them, because that's a big part I've noticed with organic in some industries, but is you need to be on the ground to be able to talk about it properly. You need to know the market.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think people overlook. They're like, oh, well, you can do it anywhere, or you can outsource to overseas. And like, yeah, from a content perspective, you probably can, but you don't actually get the essence of the area.
Yeah.
Which is why we've drawn back in from like doing, you know, clients outside of those main regions that we work within, because you just don't know.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I think you need to. I mean, I spend a lot of time traveling because of that.
Yeah.
And there's no two ways about it. Like the physical presence, what people are like, the environment, all of these aspects feed into like how they should come across. It's their point of difference. It's everything like that. It's the experience of their brand. And unless you can physically be there, it's really difficult. And it inspires me as well when creating things for people, because, and sometimes I'll say, do you guys know how cool this is? Like from an outsider's perspective, seeing it, and I'm like, oh yeah. So we'll be in Melbourne, it'll be a classic thing at a law firm, and we'll do a shoot in a cool alleyway, or we'll do something different, or where's this amazing coffee shop where we go. And I think it's really difficult to connect with people, especially if you're doing ongoing. It's okay with like when we're doing a brand refresh or something, we've had clients in the US and other places around the world, you can do that. I think the ongoing nature of content creation is a different thing though.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think that's a big part of it. Like during COVID, the plan was originally to open in New Zealand. And like that was, or actually pre-COVID. And so like the ticket was booked, was heading to New Zealand, scouting a location, looking at Wellington. Obviously that got shut down. So then it's like, I guess for us, where to next? Question mark. Like,
Yeah.
all I know is we're growing, and I want us to sustainably grow in a healthy way, with a team that's happy and with a client base that actually we like working with and like working with us.
So is that how you make the decisions on how to grow? Because one of the biggest things I struggle with is like, where do I invest time, money, effort? Yeah, what drives that for you?
I think what drives it for me is my team, actually. Skill set. Because that's a big part of, I guess, how we grow is we look at the team that we bring in and say, okay, what are your areas of actual skill and what do you like doing? And try and find products around that. And so then we might bring on X amount of clients in this sort of space or this sort of space and kind of grow in that way. I find it gives a lot more satisfaction for that team member, but also it means that the work produces better.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to fit a circle into a square hole. So like, there's no point.
What's stressful, man? Like, as the owner of a business as well, this is part of why it's worth, niching down or focusing quality work as the owner. There's enough stresses to worry about. Yeah.
Yeah. No, so I guess that's it. Like, as far as our growth strategy goes, it changes every week. So, it'll just be like, I'll wake up tomorrow and be like, oh, I really like champagne. We're going to get a champagne company. Like, no, not specifically that. But it does change quite seasonally. There is always a direction of creating quality, long-term relationships, building around that.
Yeah.
Focusing in that area and looking at, okay, well, where's the market taking us? Because that's a big part as well. And that's something that we did learn from COVID is we can't niche too much because a lot of our clients back then were in like beauty and hospitality. And obviously we got wiped out alongside them. So as much as niching is useful, we do need to have more of a diversity of skill set than a diversity of clients, if that makes sense.
Well, you can niche in so many ways. I think people get like really confused and they think, I can
niche in industry.
I have to niche in industry. And I think your business evolved. Well, ours has.
Yeah, 100%.
We've gone from just being legal to being professional services across the board now. What drove that? Clients, evolution. And so we have to keep evolving. I think that's what good leaders do of the business as well. Like, you don't, it's great if something works forever and we could just keep doing the same thing, but you
also get bored.
Get bored of it. Yeah. But especially with social, the platforms are changing, the opportunities are changing. And what does my head in a little bit is because you see the opportunity and people aren't stepping into that space. Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. And that's a question I get a lot about when people ask, oh, what's your niche? And I'm like, organic social media. Like, that's our niche. Like, we do content around it. We're a content and organic agency, but like organic brand building, etc. And they're like, yeah, but like, what's your niche? I'm like, well, service-based businesses. And they're like, yeah, but like, what's your niche? Like, what industry? I'm like, no, that is the niche. Like, we niched because there's so much that changes on organic regularly. Like, and we know the types of clients we work with, and we know the types of content they need. And it might be an interior designer and it might be a restaurant, but the way that they're interacting and what the outcome is quite similar.
Yeah.
And the way that we need to produce content, like, even though like they're very different businesses, still very visual, it's still very relationship based, especially because the biggest thing I suppose is having repeat customers or ongoing customers for most of these businesses.
Yeah.
So that sort of works. Like, it's not cookie cutter at all, but it's still like, we know the formula. But it makes me laugh all the time because that is something people are like, but I don't understand. Like, what is your niche though? I'm like, what do you mean? Do you want me to say that I do building?
Yeah.
Like,
but social media is pretty niche. Like, it's like, not, exactly.
Like,
I won't do your taxes. No. Yeah.
Don't ask me because you will get audited.
No, but exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it aligns with your skills and the skills of your agency and what you want to be doing as well. So yeah, that's really interesting. So you mentioned, COVID and recession.
Oh my God.
What's the hardest? I mean, what's the biggest thing that's gone wrong in the business, or what's the hardest stuff?
I had to do a redundancy run and fire half my staff.
Yeah.
Which was horrible. It was the worst thing ever because I guess the biggest thing about my business is I know that obviously people come and go, staff change, they grow, they adapt, but like ultimately I do actually care. We're a people first agency. Like, I would rather let go of a client than a staff member. Like, if I had the choice, if it was to do with like a relationship friction, that would be my choice every time.
Yeah.
And because like good people are hard to come by, I do feel that people that work with us usually are quite aligned in that respect.
Yep.
So yeah, at the end of 2021, I think it was, or 22. What year are we in? 24. End of 22. So not that long ago, we had to make a decision to cut our staff in half.
Yeah.
And that was awful because it wasn't that anyone wasn't doing their job well. We just lost a couple of big contracts off the back of COVID. It just was what happened. And, you know, we'd sort of been rebuilding, had a few really big contracts that kind of just ended quite suddenly. Not necessarily anything to do with us. It was to do with budgets internally for them. One of them, someone passed away. Like, it was just very quick. And we weren't able to rebuild that client base in time, to the point where my accountant was like, so you've got a month and here's what you have to do. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And that broke my heart. But in saying that, like, I really respect that team, because even the people that I did have to let go worked their asses off, right? Can I say that?
Yeah.
Okay, right up until the last day. And, you know, still have a great relationship with us. So it really was humbling, but then it kind of broke my heart even more. I'm like, I kind of wish you just hated me and never wanted to talk to me again. So I think that was the hardest thing, was having to swallow my pride and be like, hey, we don't have any money.
Yeah.
Like, or we have this much money and that can't pay everyone. So and I have to pick.
Yeah. No, it sucks. And I think it's interesting when you reflect on the nature of markets in the last few years. Like, you know, some industries have been through a lot of ups and downs. And you have to make decisions to keep the business going.
Yeah.
At different points.
I think that's the hardest thing, is being a business owner, not a human.
Yeah.
I think that's actually my hardest part of being a business, is being the business savvy owner and taking my feelings entirely out of it, even though as a human being, I'm like, that's not right.
Yeah.
As an owner, I'm like, well, that's what it is.
But that's really hard. It is so hard. And I always, you know, my wife especially is like, you know, you're too patient. You know, like
too many chances.
And it's like, this is money out of your pocket. Do you understand that? I'm like, yes, well, I do now that you tell you. But I think they're difficult decisions, especially if you want to build something and culture is important to you and people are important to you. So people tend to be the biggest, not the biggest, you know, element of all of our businesses. How do you attract good people to your business?
Social media. I do think a lot of ours comes out in our social culture. Like, if they don't know about us, they'll come and see kind of how we operate, because a lot of our, I guess, social cuts account is about our team. I think also just being really realistic and flexible. So when with our team, we do have, you know, flexible working hours, flexible arrangements. Often I found most of the people we attract are really good. And then, like, I haven't really, obviously everyone has a handful of staff members that probably don't fit quite right. But I think about a lot of it is that interview process and sort of feeling out the genuineness of those conversations and not using your typical, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Like those sorts of things. It's like, okay, like, as a human being, you know, what's something that you really love doing on the weekend? Or do you have passions outside of your work? And kind of working out, is there a balanced life outside of their job? Because I think if someone told me that their job was everything to them, I probably couldn't work with them. Yeah. Because it's not healthy. Yeah. And I want to see my team achieve. And it does mean that staff members will move on because their passions are doing so well, which is fantastic. Yeah. Heartbreaking for me every single time. It always sucks, but it's great. Like, I've had a couple of team members recently. Her side business is flourishing so much she can work in it full time. Fantastic. Yeah. Another one, her career is taking off in like a music space, and so she's got a full-time job in that. And like, as much as that breaks my heart, it makes me really happy and really grateful that I could be in that journey with them. Yeah. So I think that's a big part of it, is looking at, okay, what's the bigger picture? Because if you literally said to me, Ella, my whole life is dedicated to my job, then I probably couldn't. I can't understand that. Like, my life isn't dedicated to my job. Yeah. But how do you manage the business owner stress, Ella? Psychology. I've had a therapist literally since I started, and I go regularly enough. Like, it'll depend on ebbs and flows of life. Like, I know I experienced burnout in 2020, which was business related, but also separate to business. I had personal stuff going on. Yeah. And that was hugely important to get on top of that, because obviously you can't run a business if you don't function. What was burnout like for you? It was, I just could not function. Like, it was literally end of the road kind of. Like, I wasn't necessarily at that sort of very, very end, but I couldn't focus, couldn't concentrate, just high pressure and stress. So I ended up having to be forced to take holiday.
Yeah.
I ended up on Norfolk Island, but they didn't have internet
Right.
very much, so that was great. And then a slow process of you know, working on my sleeping patterns, working on my health, like working on all of those things, which was a very grueling process, but necessary. So I think that's probably a big part of it now, as well as like keeping that sort of therapy regular enough to sort of check in, reflect, etc. But then also recognizing, like, okay, there's a lot of pressure going on in my world right now. What do I need to step back from? Is it social events? Is it networking events? Do I need to spend more time walking my dog or going to the beach or reading a book? Like, really being more in tune with those markers.
Yeah.
And then also recognizing that it's never a reflection on me. Like, unless obviously I've done something nasty, like, which is thankfully not very often.
Yeah.
But like, you know, a client leaving or a staff member leaving is not a reflection on you as an individual or your success or your worth as a person.
Yeah.
And just constantly reminding yourself that like the business isn't you. And I think people forget.
Do you think you get better about that recognition of when your triggers, when it's building? For me, it feels like, because I've struggled with anxiety and a bit of depression, and for me, it builds and I start to see it. And if I don't take action, you know, then it cascades.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think yes. I think you know, you and I were talking just briefly before, like I've got a couple of my really key staff members resigning at the same time. And this has happened before. And previously I spiraled. Like I got so depressed, so anxious, like couldn't really function or operate, and really wasn't even sure if the business would survive it because I couldn't focus.
Yeah.
This time I'm not. Like, yes, the stress is still there. Yes, it's the same situation. But as a human being, I'm not as emotionally attached to it.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, cool. Well, this is what I need to do to fill my cup, let's say. And that's, you know, take my dog for a walk through the hinterland or whatever and read my book and then jump on work and just keep going. Like, and I guess that's where that adapt or die quote comes in, is like,
Yeah.
that's your two options. There is no other option.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. That is the reality, right?
options.
Yeah. My psychologist talks about having a menu of things that, you know, just like with eating, but a menu to choose from that fills my cup the same kind of way. And you know, and so if I'm not consuming things off that, I'm just going to go hungry. And the other analogy he uses is, you know, every time I go to the beach, I put sunscreen on, right?
Yes.
Well, what's your sunscreen
Yep.
with your mental health?
I agree.
And it's doing all these things. If you do not do it, Michael, you will get burnt. And that's, you know, what's ended up happening. And so I think, I don't know, for me, it's been repetition of, you know, I'm back here again. Okay. Like, you know, what happened? Okay. I need to drink less, eat better.
Yeah.
Go get back to jiu-jitsu, do like the gym stuff.
Yeah.
You know, turn off the X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And I think over time, at least for me, I get better at
just
identifying.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point too, is like, this is something I always, people are like, oh, well, you know, you're not depressed right now. You're not anxious right now. Why do you have a psychologist? I'm like, okay, cool. Would you stop seeing your PT or going to the gym just because you were fit right now?
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't just go, oh, I'm fit now. I've had enough. I'm not going back to the gym again.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it, is like having that constant sort of accountability to yourself, but also to, okay, well, who knows? Something will come up, and have I addressed it properly, or that reflection space? I think that's really what's helped me keep on track.
Yeah. Well, it's not a...
Because also, like that you said, he's like, you're wearing, like, did you wear sunscreen? And you're like, no. But no one else would ask you that.
No. Well, and it's I've found I was classic case business owner, classic case trying to read every book and learn everything. Going to the psychologist was really powerful for me because it cut through me having to search for the answers all the time, and actually gave me some clarity. And I still do those things. I still, you know. So we're in Sydney.
Yes.
We first met in Brisbane. What prompted the move down here?
Work, actually. Well, work and life. I think, obviously, as I sort of mentioned before, like that move to New Zealand was meant to happen. It was always kind of a goal to have another sort of space and sort of see what else we could do outside of, I guess, Brisbane. And Brisbane was never really my goal, again, because the agency was accidental. I just kind of landed there, built the community, didn't really have the opportunity to move until like the business was established enough for me to do that. Like, and I'm sure you know exactly what that's like. You're like, okay, just head on the ground, keep going. So So we had a sort of a bit of a client base down here, and it made sense for the market for me to come down and have a look at where we're at. And so far, so good. We're certainly getting a bit of a reputation, which is great. And yeah, but it's good because we still have the Brisbane team. We still have the Brisbane like client base. And I don't believe I'll ever let that go. Like I do feel that our HQ is still Brisbane, even if I'm not there.
Yeah.
Because I do like the market up there. I do like the culture. But yeah, I guess like the hopefully that answers a little bit. It was kind of to pursue that, but it was also for me like a change is as good as holiday, right? Like I felt that I was stagnating a little bit as a person in Brisbane. I needed to spread my wings, and this was briefly what we spoke about earlier too. Is like I just needed more, and like I knew so many people there. I've lived in Brisbane for 12 years, and especially in my space as a startup founder, everyone sort of knows each other. And I'm not saying I know every person in Brisbane, I certainly don't, but the conversations weren't inspiring me as much anymore. And like I still love my friends and I love the people there, but I needed to see something else.
Yeah.
And so coming here certainly has given me a new spark. Like I certainly felt myself towards the end of last year kind of be like, holy crap, this is like, and obviously a big part of that was building up the agency after our 2022 wipeout. But yeah, it's definitely good. Like I'm really liking it. And so far the team seemed pretty happy as well. So yeah.
How do you judge your own success or otherwise?
How happy am I?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really it. Can I pay my bills? Obviously. That's a huge one. Can I afford food this week? No.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big part of it is like, obviously, can I give my staff the wage they deserve? That's a huge thing for me is like, if they're doing X, Y, Z, can I give them pay rises this year?
Yeah.
Yes or no? Can I live comfortably? I don't need to be a multimillionaire. Like, I mean, obviously it'd be nice, but I don't need to be. The biggest part of my success is, does it bring me joy? Am I happy? Am I waking up wanting to go to work? Or am I waking up miserable as hell, being like, I hate my life? And if that's the answer, then no, I'm not very successful at the moment. I need to find a way to fix that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ella, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.